This episode is brought to you by Groove Washer, the best record cleaners and protective sleeves for your vinyl collection. Ask for the Groove Washer from your local shop or go to groovewasher.com. Discount code VinylGuide10.
This episode is brought to you by VMGVinyl.com. Professional record cleaning, restoration, rejuvenation, and grading. Refresh your records with VMGVinyl.com.
And now, on with the show.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 440 of the Vinyl Guide. And this is part 2 of our 2-part conversation with music producer Jack Douglas. Now, it may help to listen to part 1 first. That's episode 439. But regardless, today we are jumping deep into the production and recording of the John Lennon and Yoko Ono album Double Fantasy, some of which we started in episode 439, including some of Jack's recollections about working with John Lennon and David Bowie during the Fame recording session, what the demo tapes were like for Double Fantasy going into it, what John was hoping to accomplish with Double Fantasy, some of the secrecy around the sessions, what John's record collection in the Dakota was like, and lots more. So that's in episode 439. Today, we cover some fascinating topics, including John Lennon's collaboration with Cheap Trick, the recording highlights of Double Fantasy. We walk through what John's last day was like, the private memorial for John, producing the 2010 stripped back version of Double Fantasy, and we even talk more about Cheap Trick live at Budokan, Aerosmith Double Live bootleg, and more. And if you want some new music to check out, Jack has recently produced an album for the band Silver Planes. The album is titled Airbus. This was discussed again at length in episode 439, and I want to remind everyone to check out the band Silver Planes. Airbus is a great album. I've heard the whole thing. The songwriting, the production, the sonics are absolute top notch. Look up Silver Planes, follow them on your streaming service, and order the vinyl from makerecords.com. All right, let's get back into it. Part 2 of our 2-part conversation with producer Jack Douglas. So one of the things I wanted to revisit about John Lennon's record collection, because you had spent time with John at the Dakota, you mentioned he had a whole room of records that was just dedicated to music.
No, he had a room that had lots of records in it, but it also had lots of other things like guitars and some amps. Mm-hmm. And a few other things, but it was dominated by records.
When you were producing Double Fantasy, did he play you records from perhaps other artists and say, this is kind of what I'm going for with this song?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, he left all of that to me. I would rehearse with the band who didn't know whose record they were making, and I charted everything from his demos. And then I would record the rehearsal and then go back to the Dakota and jump in bed with him, which is where he liked to work, in his bedroom, surrounded by all kinds of tape recorders and TV monitors and keyboards and all around the bed, and guitars behind him that he could just reach back and grab. And then he would listen to the arrangements, and then he would make some suggestions to me about what I would change the next day during rehearsal.
So he had all these things within reach that he could grab and
But he didn't play me any specific things. That he made it clear that it wasn't going to be a hard rock album. That he made it clear. He said, "I know how you like to rock out. I know from the albums that you do that you like to rock out hard, but this is not a hard rock album. This is a what he called an MOR record." Middle of the road.
Right.
For 30 to 40 year olds and older.
So when you brought in the guys from Cheap Trick, you were just kind of feeling out the edges, exactly what he wanted in terms of
No, that was well into the record. I already knew what we were doing. But I thought that particular song, I'm Losing You, would sound great with more of an edge on it. And when I told them that I was going to invite these guys, it was funny because they were in Montserrat working with George Martin, who I knew well. So I called George and I said, "Listen, I've got your guy. Can I borrow my guys?" And he said, "Absolutely." And John flew them up from Montserrat, and he just had fun working with them. that day because it was a whole other kind of scene. Not that the other guys weren't fun to work with, but this was, just more. It brought him back to where he came from.
And Rick Nielsen and Bunny, and I don't think I've ever seen a picture of them together with John.
No, I don't think there might have been some pictures taken, but I don't recall ever seeing them myself. Though I have seen many pictures of John with the guitar that Rick gave him.
Oh, Rick gave him a guitar? No.
Well, it's a great story. So, like any guitar player that I've ever worked with, they bring all of their guitars to the session. So they were just, they were lined up outside in the studio. Not that he used anything but the same two guitars the whole time, except for when we got to Walking on Thin Ice when he used the Strat. But otherwise, it was the Ovation acoustic and that strange-looking Sardonicus or whatever it was called with the rails. So, pretty much, I think there were only about 5 made. And he liked that guitar, and that sounded great also. But he had all his guitars out there. And at one point I said to him, do you mind if I take a look at what else you brought? And he said, no, go ahead. So I went out and there was a shorter case. I mean, there was there was a couple of Les Pauls, there were a couple more really nice acoustics, a J60, and, all the Beatles stuff you usually see. But the shorter case was the one that intrigued me. And I opened it up and it was the Black Ricky. And you could see that it had been repaired a number of times, but very well. Like a headstock break and some other things that had been repaired over time. And I picked it up, and when I turned it over to look at the back of it, the tape to the back was the Shea Stadium set list. And and it was like holding this iconic thing in my hand. It was amazing. So Rick, who's a big guitar freak, has an amazing collection of guitars. It's 2 vaults worth. And so when Rick was there, I said, Rick, you got to see this. Come on, I'll take a look at John's collection. He went right to the little case, knowing that it might possibly be the Ricky. And he opened it up, and there it was, a beautiful old Black Ricky in there. And I said, pick it up. He said, you think John will mind? I said, no, you won't mind. Go ahead, pick it up. And when he turned it over and he saw the set list on it, I thought he was going to pee himself. And so later he went out and he took some measurements of it and photographed it a few times. And then about a month later, we're in the studio and this box arrives, and it's from Rick Nielsen to John Lennon. John gets excited and he opens it up, and it's an all-white Hamer that Rick had made for John. And it was John Lennon model 001. And it was absolutely gorgeous, all white. And it had John's signature on it, which Rick had either traced or somehow had made from the check that John gave him for playing on the sessions, which Rick, of course, never cashed. I think it was a check for $1,000 or something, and Rick never cashed it, but got the signature off it and put it on the guitar. And that was in red mother of pearl, and it looked amazing. And John just flipped out. He loved it. He didn't play it because he thought it was too special. I think it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now. And I've seen some great pictures of him holding it up that day when he got it. He was so thrilled. And it was the exact same measurement and size as the Black Ricky, because John had smaller hands, and so the neck was exactly like the Ricky, the scale of it. More like a 3/4 guitar, a full guitar. It's beautiful.
I understand on the day. Now I've heard the version of I'm Losing You. I also understand there was a version of I'm Moving On that was recorded.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's available.
Is that yeah, I've been trying to find that. So
in a box set. with a lot of other stuff.
Okay. Any other tracks that were recorded that day?
Not with them. No. I mean, it took quite a while. It took quite a while to get I'm Losing You, because the whole that got worked out with between jamming between Rick and John and Tony Levin. So they bounced it around for a few hours before we recorded it, just having fun really with it.
Right.
Now, the funny thing was when I said that Cheap Trick was coming to play, members of Cheap Trick were coming to play, he wasn't quite sure who Cheap Trick was. And when Rick walked in the room, John said to him, "Oh, it's you."
Because John, of course, would have been familiar with them, certainly through your work, and they were popular.
It just slipped his mind, when I said Cheap Trick's members of Cheap Trick are going to play on. Oh, okay.
So with John's records, do you remember kind of the sort of music he was listening to? Any sort of records that he would have out quite a bit or play frequently?
I never watched him play records in his house, but I know that he was very familiar with reggae and early hip hop, and not so much punk, but the whole catalog of it, all English rock.
Yeah,
and we kept my radio, my Sony Blaster, on the console because I like to listen through it to see where I was. It was very critical, so I could tell if I had enough bottom and top, and I'd listen to it. And when we weren't working, he would switch on the over to FM radio, WNEW, and listen to the radio when we weren't doing anything. And if a Beatle record came on, which did frequently, he would tell you everything that happened that day while that song was being made, and go on and on about how it was his band and how much he loved it.
So he looked back on Beatles at that time with immense fondness, it sounds like.
Yes, but he also said that he would love to do those songs over again.
Okay.
He said to me, if I could, he said, I'd do Strawberry Fields over again. I said, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it's perfection. He said, to you it is, but to me it isn't.
Did he explain why? Did he?
No, he just wanted to do it again. Listen, I've worked with a lot of artists. Steven Tyler has even said to me, I'd love to do Sweet Emotion again. And I'm like, really? Why? It's like they all think that it could be done better. And I suffer from the same thing when I hear my songs on the radio, things that I've done. I've gone, if I'd just done one or two more mixes, I think I would have gotten exactly where I wanted it. But I'm always ready to accept. Listen, when I hear anything, I accept that for what it is. It's like when you listen to the Stones, it's out of tune sometimes, and it's sloppy, and it's good, and I accept it for what it is. I accept everything that I hear as that's what it is. So I accept my own work as well, and not obsess about it.
Yeah, well, a lot of artists, I think, do that. They'll focus on the areas that they weren't comfortable with, and maybe miss what the rest of us are getting when we listen to it complete without that background, without that.
Right. That one thing. Now, of course, you can make perfect records, and I don't like it. To me, it takes a lot out of it.
Right. Was there anything about Double Fantasy that John or Yoko or yourself thought you'd want to revisit? Like once it was mastered in like October of 1980?
No, there was nothing on it. I mean, we knew we were going back to what became Milk and Honey, because those were just live vocals. And so, that was work to be done. But no, we had it down. We thought it was where we wanted it to be.
The tracks that became Milk and Honey at the time, were those considered outtakes, or were those work in progress?
The works in progress to be continued. I mean, our plan was, I mean, what John told me when we finished Double Fantasy, and when Double Fantasy was wrapped, and we went out for dinner a couple of days later, and he said to me, "Okay, well, I'm going back to Bermuda. I'm going to hang out for a while, maybe do some more writing, and then right around the first of the year, we'll get back to what we have to do." So I said, "Great," and I thought he was not going to be back, and then he called me up. And I said, "You in Bermuda?" He said, "No, no, no. I'm in New York. I want to go back in the studio to do some more work," which was when we went in for Milk and Honey. No, I'm sorry, Walking on Thin Ice. Luckily for me, every song had live vocals on it. So all of those tracks you hear on Milk and Honey, those are all the live vocals.
Now, I know we talked about him on his last day working on Walking on Thin Ice. But that was recorded prior to the 8th of December. 8th of December was just a mix down. Is that right?
8th of December, we finished mixing it.
Yeah. But it was recorded in the days or weeks before.
Yes. Okay. But it was a tape loop that John and I played over. Mm-hmm. That was never anything that was going to be. It was a bit of a jam, and then we made tape loops of it, and then overdubbed it. There were no other musicians involved in that record at all except John.
Oh, okay. So the backing band wasn't part of that track.
The backing band had already jammed that, something that turned into that track after we did drum loops and bass loops.
If you can you walk me through what that last day with John was like?
It was great. He was doing interviews. Primarily, we knew that we had the mix. So that day we were just going over to see if there was any little updates or anything that we wanted to do on it. We were now back at Record Plant from Hit Factory, and in the mix room, which is where we did all the work on that. It was in the mix room. There was a booth for Yoko to do vocals, and any bass or guitar instruments were played directly at the board. So I think maybe we did one or two updates on it, minor things. Basically, it was a day of press, people coming in to listen, him doing interviews, and then when everyone left, we went through it one more time, and then I called George Marino, said we'll be in at 9 a.m. to master, and I walked John and Yoko to the elevator and said good night. See you in the morning. More of a celebratory day because we were very happy with what we had.
Well, what was the idea for Walking on Thin Ice? Was it going to be a single? Was it going to be part of Milk and what would have been the next album?
It was the idea that John had that Yoko could do something that was so cool that it would rocket her up the charts with a single.
Was her own platform away from John.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So it was a very basic melody and lyric, but the spoken word part in it was really cool, and it was also a good dance tune. So it got played in the discos quite a bit.
Yeah, I really like Yoko's contributions to Double Fantasy. I think they're amongst the most interesting moments of the album. And Walking on Thin Ice feels like that as well.
Yeah, even one step further, actually, because she was doing so much spoken word in it.
Interesting. The the track Kiss, Kiss, Kiss. I have vivid memories of listening to the tape of Double Fantasy in the car with my parents and having to fast forward the end of that song because of the orgasmic portion of it. What was recording that moment like?
Well, we built a box for her to get in, so she would feel free to give herself an orgasm without us looking at her. Mm-hmm. It's a real or authentic orgasm. We couldn't see her. We built a little house out of gobos, and she got in it, and then we recorded that piece, the end.
So that's a lot of planning. At some point, it's like, okay, we want an orgasm on this song. How are we going to achieve it?
Well, it was not something I had planned for. It took me by surprise, but she had taken me by surprise a number of times on the other records that we made. I made 2 or 3 records with her and been in the studio with her many times, sometimes with John, and many times without him.
Okay.
I mean, she brought in one time these little steam engines that played instruments. So there would be like this little steam engine, you put water in it, fired it up, and the arm on it was playing a tiny violin. And so, to record things like that, because the steam engine was much louder than the little violin, she would always challenge me with some pretty wild stuff. But I loved it. It was fun.
Mm-hmm. Unconventional, but very, very innovative.
Yeah.
So they were working towards a project that was probably similar to what Season of Glass became. Was that kind of the idea for Yoko, to have her own album?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was John's idea, too, was to have her be able to be recognized as a serious artist on her own, mm-hmm. and make her own records that would be recognized, because the other ones were not big smashes that we did. So that, as he said to me, the next record is with the boys. And since we had spoken about this Ringo album backed by John, Paul, and George, I assumed that when he said the next record that we'll do as a record from the ground up is with the boys.
Right.
Now, there was also a tour planned. So I think after we finished up what became Milk and Honey, when we finished that, he was planning for touring. In fact, he had already designed what the stage would look like, which was really amazing. He did a lot of drawing anyway. The whole front wall was plastered with his drawings.
Was there ideas of the cities they would get? Did they get much further than conceptualization of what a tour, what the stage may look like?
It was going to be a world tour to back the record. I'm sure that David Geffen was very happy about that as well.
Was the album always going to be called Double Fantasy?
We'll be back after these messages.
Well, hey there, record collectors. There's a new service available that specializes in record cleaning, restoring, sticker removal, and professional grading.
VMGvinyl.com.
VMG Vinyl can help you make the most of your collectible records. From professional cleaning of records and sleeves,
removing old price tags and store stickers,
dry cleaning and rejuvenation of old shrink wrap to make it look like new, even providing you a professional play-tested third-party grade with either removable grading or encasing in plastic. You have a wide range of choices at VMGvinyl.com.
Buying a highly collectible record and you want it checked out by an expert?
VMG Vinyl can do that too. Head over there now and see what VMGvinyl.com can do for you and your collection. That's VMGvinyl.com, the one-stop shop for professional third-party grading, cleaning, and record restoration. That's VMGvinyl.com. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
Was the album always going to be called Double Fantasy?
Apparently, although when I first got wind of what we were doing, there was that wasn't the title. But shortly after, when I was up at the Dakota, we were getting the thing in motion. It was announced to me that it was called Double Fantasy, based on some flower called Double Fantasy, and that it was also subtitled A Heart Play. I mean, at first, the very beginning, it was just a John album. That was the first thing. But that lasted maybe a day. And then it was a John and Yoko album. So I had both John's 2 cassettes filled with demos and Yoko's reel-to-reels, which were quite a handful of demos for me to choose from. But when she gave me those tapes, she told me, this is not just a John album. This is the both of us.
But there's not the combination of them on the tracks. It's the alternating.
Yeah.
John Lennon one, Yoko another. So there wasn't a plan for them to collaborate on a single song.
No. Hard Times Are Over. I think there's 2 songs that they're both singing on.
I was always interested in the story behind. There's 2 songs on the album, Beautiful Boys.
Yeah, there's Yoko's retort to well, they're just gaming and men being boys and childish, whereas Beautiful Boy is specifically about Sean.
Yeah.
Paul's favorite John song.
Oh, it's a gorgeous song. I mean, any father would almost tear up at the sound of that song.
Yeah.
But Beautiful Boys doesn't sound as much of a retort. It's a perspective, of course, but it doesn't. It's only beautiful.
It's not.
Yeah.
No, it's more about John than it is about Sean.
Right.
There's a video. I don't know if you've ever seen it. That was taken on John's birthday. Have you ever seen that video in the studio?
I don't think so. I think I've seen pictures of him in the studio on his birthday, but not a video.
Yeah, there's a video. Bob Gruen came in and his present to John was a video camera. It was the first one to have a screen that popped out, and that was his present. So he comes in with it. I take the camera away from him, and I'm shooting Bob, and then I give it back to Bob, and John is doing the Playboy interview. And so Bob videos John doing the Playboy interview at the control room board, and in the background, I'm editing all the sounds for Beautiful Boys, and you can hear I'm lifting things from different sound effects I'm putting in.
Right.
You can hear all that. Well, it's in the video.
I understand there's a lot of recording just of the sessions and just the chatter throughout.
Well, because we had hidden microphones all over the place, which John, on the second day we're recording, I mean, the thing that was always eerie to me was that John wanted he kept it. He had a journal being kept of everything that happened every day, and on top of that, he said to me, it'd be great to record everything that goes on in the studio, but I don't want to know if you hidden microphones anywhere. But I want to be able to. I hid microphones everywhere. I had hidden microphones everywhere. I had hours and hours and hours of everything that happened. From the second day on, but I never mentioned it to him. And on his birthday, what I had was in another room, I had 2 what they call transcription tape recorders, which are giant reels that go very slow at 3 3/4. So when you put a reel on, it's going to last hours. And then if that one gave up, it automatically switched to the other one. And then my assistant would go in occasionally and have to change a reel. But usually those 2 reels would last the whole day. And everything that happened, I mean, I had microphones in the control room. I had microphones in John's little room that he went to. I had microphones in the maintenance room where we used to hide our pizza and cheeseburgers. Because we were on a strict sushi only, a microbiotic sushi only diet. that it didn't last very long, and my wife would go out and get the burgers and the pizza and deliver it. But so every day forward, we recorded, and for his birthday, I had all of that tape up to his birthday in October. I had that all transferred to cassettes, and for his birthday, I gave him cassettes. He was very surprised that I actually had done it. And then I continued to do it after his birthday. And then when we went to Record Plant to do Walking on Thin Ice, I hid the microphones again there. So everything was, and then, bits and bobs of it have come out over the years as I don't know what Yoko called them. Also, there was a film made, and that disappeared as well. It was shot on 16 millimeter.
Wow. So you have a recording of the last moments when he's getting in the elevator and you're saying, "I'll see you tomorrow."
Well, that would have been out in the hallway. So I didn't have microphones there, but the last day of that we worked, I destroyed that tape.
Why did you destroy it?
Because John said some things to me that he promised I would never tell anyone. And so I had to keep my word to him and just dumped the reel.
Wow. So not even Yoko's heard that?
No.
Wow. So with all those reels, with the exception of the last day, what's become of them, or what do you think will become of them?
Yoko has them. Wherever she keeps all of the material. I mean, John had a vault at Record Plant, and in that vault there was, countless, hundreds of recordings, including some of the some live 3-tracks. Shea Stadium, for example, was down there, and was the New York Apple, whatever Apple New York. And his personal collection at the memorial service that we had for John, which was just Yoko and I and one assistant that I had. Yoko wanted to just listen to all of this, mostly dialogue and jamming and things that brought him back to us. And so we listened to that she asked me to come in around 11 o'clock at night and to have all this stuff brought up from the vault. And we just sat there and continuously listened to all this material that was in the vault.
When was this? Still early December?
This was the night after he passed away.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
This was his service. This was the only memorial service we had for him. And it was just the two of us.
24 hours after the event.
24. Yeah.
Okay. So those tapes were brought up. The three of you, Yoko, and your assistant sat and you listened to those tapes probably through the night.
We did till about 4 or 5 in the morning.
I guess she just wanted to be around the sound of John.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It was tough.
Wow. Was that the only service that there was?
That was it. Yeah.
That was it. Okay.
Yeah. John was already cremated.
Okay. So after he left, he got in the elevator, went down. You went back to a session, as I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess you got a phone call and...
No, my wife came up to tell me.
Okay.
She came in to tell me what she heard. And we went right to Roosevelt Hospital.
I believe shortly thereafter was the day or the day after you had gone on I went on Tom Snyder the next night, and after that we had the service. Oh, okay. Jeez, what a 24 hours. So, so you were like the spokesperson, I guess, at that point, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. How soon was it after that Yoko came in and started working on music again?
Oh, not for some time.
Okay.
She went in with Phil Spector to mix what was left over. which if John had been alive would have been blasphemy. He hated him.
Now, I know you and Yoko have had your moments, your challenges, and you've been working together for many years again.
Yeah, but at that time, she got this assistant, this snake, Sam Havitoy, who convinced her that, I mean, she was already a broken woman. He convinced her that anybody that knew everything about what was going on in their household, in their personal lives, and in the studio would sell them out. And that I, in particular, might be a real enemy to them, which, of course, there's no way I would ever do that. And so he said, buy him out of the contract. I didn't bother her for 2 years. I just let her grieve for 2 years and never bothered her. And then after 2 years, my lawyer said, this thing has sold millions of copies. You have a rock solid contract. You should get paid. And so I approached Yoko and said, I think it's time that we straighten out the business end of what we did. And so she told me to come down to, I lived around the corner, basically. So come around to Studio One, which is her office on the ground floor of the Dakota. And we'll start and we'll work it out. And when I got there, it was Sam Havitoy I met, and I asked for Yoko, and he said she's not available. And this guy, I sat down, and he passed across the Yoko's desk a check for $250,000. And I said, well, what's this for? And he said, this is what you deserve for making this record. And I said, I don't think so. I mean, I have a contract. It's a royalty contract. It's not, you can buy me out for $250,000. It's an insult. And so I begged her any number of times not to do it, not to take it to court. And we did. And there was a jury trial. Jury was out for 10 minutes. And it was really a horrendous experience for me to have to do that. I felt so uncomfortable. But she had Phil Spector go on the stand. Phil was so fucked up on drugs or alcohol or whatever. He got up on the witness stand and spoke gibberish and tripped as he was getting off the stand, and his wig kind of got ajar. The sideburns were now over his nose, and it was just a terrible sight. And then there was, everybody wanted the journal. And so, what's his name? The editor of Rolling Stone.
Oh yeah. Jan Wenner.
Okay. So Jan, what she did was she promised Jan that she would give him an exclusive to the journal, if he testified on her behalf about me being a nobody. I mean, mind you, I had sold millions of records, produced records that sold millions. And now he gets up on the stand and he says, this guy, he's just a nobody, a glorified engineer. I did all the arrangements for this thing, and steered the two artists through 2 records. And he's saying, "Oh, now my attorney, who knew that Jan was going to be really a pain in the ass, what he did was he got a book that Jan wrote, and there's a couple of paragraphs about how he thought I was a really amazing producer in his book." And he asked Jan to read it on the stand. And that was, again, I was so embarrassed for him. There was also a male witch who was trying to put a spell on me, who sat behind me every day, who I thought was there, like on my side. So I kept smiling at him and thanking him for being there. apparently I blew his mind, and he gave up. Bob Gruen told me in the bathroom, he said, well, you really destroyed that guy. I said, what guy? He goes, the witch that was trying to put a spell on you. I said, that guy, I'd turn around, he'd be like staring at me intensely. Yeah, well, he's gone. That didn't work. Bob and I can only speak in the bathroom because Bob was working for Yoko. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I was so happy when it was over. It was millions of dollars. And then I got invited to come down to see Sean. Now, this is many years later.
Right. And
Yoko and I had not spoken. I came down to see Sean do a show, and I can't remember who invited me. It was, whether it was the label, but anyway, I'm sitting down at the Bowery Ballroom, which is a nice place, and somebody came down and said, Yoko would like to see you. And she was up in the balcony and I went up and she gave me a hug, and she said, she said something about his water over the bridge. This is over. And then I was working with her on and off again. And I get a Christmas card from her every year. And when she opened, her opening at the Met, or her art at the Modern, I was invited. I was there. Some nice pictures of her and I at the Modern. We have a good relationship. And when we did the stripped down version, she wrote some very nice things on the inner sleeve about my relationship with John. Mm-hmm. And she would come by, to approve about every 3 or 4 days of the work I was doing on.
So the history's been corrected in that regard.
Yeah, and Sam Havertoy is long gone.
Yeah.
Snake.
Well, and the test of time, you proved you weren't there to sell them out or write a book or anything like that. Yeah. So the 2010 stripped down version went back to the multi-tracks. What was the conversation like to produce that? Why did you feel that version of the album needed to be shared?
That was my idea. That was Yoko's idea. But I think stripped down versions were in vogue at that time, around 2010, of other records. And so it seemed like, this is another way to make a few bucks. But I knew that it would be a very interesting project, because to hear John sing without the double tracking and all the overdubs, and to insert some of his dialogue, I thought was really a worthy project, and it was really wonderful to do it. I called up Lee DiCarlo, who was the original engineer on it, and he was retired. Mm-hmm. He's running a string of charter boats, something he always wanted to do. But my main engineer has always been Jay Messina. So I said to Jay, you want to do this? He said, absolutely. And we went to Power Station and locked ourselves in a room and worked on that for weeks. And it was just, this is funny, or strange or ironic. So I had to collect all of those master reels, the multi-tracks from those dates, and transfer them to digital realm, to Pro Tools at the highest possible sampling rate I could get, 192. And I wanted the absolute best A to D converters I could find for this. Of course, the tapes had to be baked, so I would get maybe 10 tapes a day after they were baked. And I said to Jay, do me a favor and find out who's got the best A to D converters in the city. And he called me back a day or so later, and he said, Sony Battery by far, because they do so much of that kind of work for the Sony catalog, that they have the best A to D converters. So I said, you got a number? So he gave me the phone number, and I called him up and I said, hello, this is Jack Douglas. And I said, I know because that Sony Battery is for Sony artists, and it's just a mastering and redoing, you know, their rooms just for turning old 78s into sounding like they were made yet. So I called them up and I said, listen, I know I'm not a Sony artist, but I've done so much work for you guys for Columbia. She said, oh, I know exactly who you are. She said, we would welcome you here. What's the project? And I said, I'm going to be transferring all of John Lennon's Double Fantasy to digital. And I understand you have the best converters. And she said, she was hesitant. And she said, you might be a little uncomfortable doing it here. I said, really? Why? Because, she said, well, we're at 321 West 44th Street. Oh, I said, where Record Plant was? She said, yes. I said, I think I could handle going back into where Record Plant was long gone. Going back. She said, no, it's more than that. She said, we're on the 10th floor of Record Plant. I said, oh my. I said, that's really amazing. That's the floor where we last worked. And she said, well, it's even more than that. You would be in the room that you last worked in. And that room hasn't changed. So I was going back to the very same room that I was last time I was there. I was with him. And at first I thought, oh man, this is tough. I mean, I'm listening to the record and we're in the same room. And I thought every time, and now I'm going through all of these tapes and I'm listening to his dialogue and I'm thinking, God, I'm just like that guy. I feel like there's a ghost in the room. And then suddenly the ghost became very helpful to me because John would say in the, him talking to me I'm in the control room, he's in the studio and we're doing a track and he's saying to me, I would like to have a sax solo on this tune. I said, okay, we'll get Georgie Young in to do it. He said, I'm going to hum the sax part when we get to where I think the sax solo should be. I said, fine, do it. And so when the sax solo came up, where it would be, he hummed the part. And so on the stripped down version, I just put him in humming the part instead of the sax, which was an overdub. So all these, I found all these clues to things that he was saying. And instead of him being a ghost, he became a conspirator working with me, showing me where things were, where I might find takes that, he thought were coolest. And it was strange, but quite beautiful.
Wow. I imagine there were so many moments you heard on those tapes that you completely forgot happened, but were.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. In recent years, we had the Peter Jackson Get Back series, which I'm sure you saw. We all got a view of watching the Beatles and, of course, John work on music, which I think gave all of us, most of us, probably excluding yourself and a handful of others, a very different view than we knew of John. Did that series bring back some moments for you, or do you recognize John's working habits in that?
Yeah, absolutely. In particular, his humor. And the lack of patience, which you sometimes see there, I recognize from my early work with him, like on Imagine, in the early stuff. When I first got to know him, he was very impatient. By the time we got to Double Fantasy, he was just he was a joy to work with. And because I stayed ahead of him most of the time, what we were doing, and I had it planned out, and we had breakfast every morning, so he knew what we were going to do every day, and we stuck to it. He was just a joy to work with. He was never bored ever. So, that was him. Totally, yeah.
It seemed he was always creating, and the music was just one fragment of it. And he would write part of the song, and then you could almost see his need to move beyond it and do something different. So it doesn't surprise me that the studio was full of his drawings, because he recorded his parts and he still needed to create.
Yeah. I mean, the whole front wall was just taped up. There were hundreds of them. Then one day they were gone, but he was giving them out to whoever wanted them. Probably very valuable. I have a few. I gave a few to my friends. He said, "John, can I take this? Take whatever you want." Then one day they were all gone.
Do you have any drawings that he made of you?
No. The only person that ever drew pictures of me was Ronnie Wood, who was very good. Ronnie Wood did a portrait of me.
I always see John's doodles, and I figured, him and Yoko and different things around him. So
he was doing doodles of the studio, looking out at it, and just different things, the goofy, strange things, cartoons.
So, look, before we go, Jack, and speaking of goofy, strange things, can we spend a few moments talking about Cheap Trick live at Budokan?
Sure.
Now, I know you pretty much discovered Cheap Trick, as I understand the story.
Yeah.
You produced the first album.
Well, the reason I couldn't do the second album, which they planned I was going to do, is because I was locked in a house in Armonk, New York, rather a castle, with Aerosmith doing Draw the Line, which took a year. Took a year out of my life because they were, at that point they were pretty fucked up. And so some days we wouldn't be working, or I couldn't find them, or they weren't able to work. And so a year of my life went on that. And Epic Records was calling for the next Cheap Trick record. Tom Werman was head of A&R. He's the guy that I called to sign them. Now, when Rick called me to say, what are we doing? Are we doing this second album? I said, I'll tell you what, I'd like to have Rick Derringer produce it, and I'll executive produce it. Because I can't produce it because I'm here with Aerosmith. There's nothing I can do about it. So he was like, cool. Rick is a good producer, and that would work, and it would also preserve the sound of the edge that we were getting on the first record. But Tom, who loved he loved the band. He loved Cheap Trick. That's why I was able to get him to sign the band. And plus I threatened to take him to RCA if he didn't. But he said, I want to produce it. And he had producing cred. He produced some good records. And he brought them out to LA and produced them. There are copies of those songs, because we recorded 30 songs, I think, when we did the first album, including I Want You to Want Me, Surrender. All of those I put on the back burner for a second album, because I wanted the first album to have some political, social relevance, which it does.
Why was that important? Why was that important?
I just wanted that album first album to be introduced to them. First of all, I thought, where is this record going to go? It's going to go to college. That was what I thought. I thought the band would succeed at college. They wouldn't be overwhelmingly successful outside of that yet. But because of these things, all these songs had social relevancy, I would put this record together. I mean, they wrote these songs. It worked. So, and that's where it was going to. Also having success at college radio. Of course, Tom saw bigger things for them. And I thought the commercial stuff, like I Want You to Want Me, Surrender, I Love Go-Go Girls, Dream Police, all these other songs could go a little bit later.
They had Dream Police that early in their first recordings. Wow.
Yeah. And so that stuff was we recorded the basic tracks and we put that aside. We probably would have re-recorded them. But it certainly, I Want You to Want Me was not going to be soft. It was going to be edgy. And so they went to LA. They did a rather softer version of themselves on that In Color. And it was successful because those songs are great. And Tom did a great job. And he knew, because he's a company mind, he was head of A&R, how to make them successful. And so that brought them to another level. When it came to Budokan, which was only supposed to be for the Japanese audience, I knew live they sounded a lot different than they did In Color. Live, they sounded like the first record. They didn't sound like the second record, but the second record was great, and in Japan had been successful as well as the first one, but the second one was really successful. So when Rick asked me to mix that record, they sent me, because it was only going to be for Japan, they sent me all the tapes. Osaka, some other place, Budokan, maybe 3 different concerts. So it was going to be called Budokan. So I put up the Budokan tape. It was Jay Messina and I, and it was great performance, but so poorly recorded that there were really no drums. There was no bass drum to speak of. It must have been maybe one mic far away.
Oh, okay.
There was all kinds of mics going on and off. It wasn't happening. So we listened, and we got to Osaka. Osaka sounded reasonable, although I had to reinvent the drums by putting a drum set out in the studio and taking the one mic that was a bit closer. At least the tom-toms were decent, and filtering everything out except 30 cycles, and then putting a speaker on the head of the bass drum and pumping that 30 cycle from the kit into that bass drum and recording it. Now it sounded like a bass drum. And then I did the same. I filtered out to like 5,000 cycles, and put that microphone on top of the snare drum and recorded it from underneath so you could hear the snares. And so I reinvented the drums. There were plenty of tom-toms and cymbals, so I didn't have to worry about that. And of course, it's all in sync, so it wasn't going to be a problem. And then Jay and I mixed everything from Osaka, and they called it Live at Budokan, but it was Osaka.
Right.
So now, many years later, I get a call from Rick, and he said, "We found the videotapes from Budokan." He said, "Can you transfer all of the like the album to the?" I said, "But did you forget something, Rick?" the album is Osaka, even though we call it Budokan. The album is Osaka. The tape is Budokan, the movie. So he said, "Well, you'll have to do your magic now." Luckily, we're dealing with Pro Tools now, so I would cut and paste. Whenever there was a close-up of Robin, I would use the vocal from Budokan. If there was a close-up of Rick's guitar, I would use Budokan. Otherwise, I was using still Osaka.
Wow.
And it worked fine. I mean, we had to nudge here and there. You can't tell it's flawless. And we mixed it in 5/1. And it was really a patch job, but it worked. And anyway, the I Want You to Want Me from Budokan, which was edgy and sounded like the band, that was the hit finally. And that put them over the top. In fact, no one expected that thing was going to sell 15 million units or more in America, which it has up to this point.
Yeah.
15.
As I understand, again, it was meant for a Japan-only release, and then it started coming to the U.S. in imports.
That's right.
At what moment, I mean, were you in the room, or were you part of the decision to say, you know what, this needs a domestic release, or no, this is a juggernaut?
That was totally up to the people at Sony.
Okay.
But they knew they had a good thing. And when they released I Want You to Want Me, it just zoomed.
And it sounds like it's 100% live from what you said. I mean, were there many overdubs at all?
No overdubs. No overdubs. Wow. No, I take that back. There was one bass overdub we had to do because the bass crapped out, and we couldn't find another bass even in that section because the other ones were so poorly recorded. It was impossible. So Tom came in. He was maybe in for an hour, and he did. And he he fixed the bass on that, and we matched it up and put it in. That was the only overdub. No other overdubs. It reminds me of when we did the Aerosmith live album,
Bootleg, yeah,
where we got to when we were doing that, Kiss Alive, and
Frampton,
yeah, those were really studio albums with the audience from the live show, and they were flawless and beautiful sounding, and really. So Stephen and I and Joe, we started talking, and we said we should do one that sounds like you're at the show, with hiccups and farts and pimples and whatever happens. Songs that are played too fast, but make it sound like if you came to an Aerosmith show, this is what you would sound like it was somebody recording a bootleg of the show. So we sorted through. I went on tour with them for about 2 months with a remote truck. And then we came back to the studio. We sorted through all the best of what we had, no fixes, and we made it sound like you were experiencing Aerosmith at a show, with mistakes, everything. And when I finished, I sent it over to Sony, and they said, "Are you serious? This is awful." No, I said, "Do you realize the name of the record is Bootleg? It's supposed to sound like the excitement of being at an Aerosmith show. This is what it's like. It's exciting." And then they said, "No, Oscar, you have to remix it. You got to do something. You got to fix things up. It should sound like Kiss Comes Alive." So Stephen and I were like, thinking, we're not doing it that way. No matter what, we're not doing that way. We just won't do the record. So I called up Sony and I said, "Okay, I'm going to go in the studio. I booked into Record Plant for about 4 or 5 days, and then I'll get it back to you." And they said, "Okay." And I never went to the studio. None of us did. We just booked the time, and we didn't go to the studio. And then I gave them the same tape back, and they put it out.
They're all, "Thank you."
It was great. We loved it. And Slash told me, he said, we played that album in the dressing room before we went out on stage. Every show. That was what got us going. That excitement. That's what we wanted to do. Just like that.
Yeah. That's a great album. I love how they even leaned into the artwork with the bootleg motif and the coffee cup stain. And
and then some of that stuff was from really early Stephen found some tapes from a club date. I think it was Popcorn.
Mother Popcorn. And side 4.
Yeah.
I remember it well.
Yeah. When I was doing that record, so we were in the truck for a couple months and doing a U.S. tour. And I had that same Sony, the one that I later used with John, my blaster, which I liked. It had a great sound. And we were doing live radio shows from wherever we were. We were, so we'd do one in Detroit and Cleveland. It was a live broadcast. And I would listen while I was mixing for the radio show. I would listen through the radio to the radio show. So I was using the radio compression that they have to my advantage. And that's, and so what happened was there's an amazing amount of real bootlegs that people recorded off of that radio shows all over the country that sound great. They sound really,
when I've worked in a studio before, certainly not the scale you have, but we'd always do the car test. Like if you do a mix down and then you run out to your car because you're so used to listening to it there. If it works there, then you got something.
Here's where Record Plant went one step further with that. They had a Record Plant radio station. So you could go outside with a radio and actually broadcast. It would broadcast it to your radio with all of the standard, everything that was standard on radio broadcasts, all the limiting and everything else. So you would really hear what it would sound like on radio. Here's the only thing. People would drive by on 44th Street. If they had their radio on a particular place, they could hear what we were doing. They were like, what the fuck is this? It sounds like Aerosmith or Kiss or...
That's what I was going to say. Anyone with that frequency in the neighborhood could hear what you guys are up to.
People got previews of Born to Run.
Oh, that's wonderful. Look, Jack, again, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much for teeing up another session, right? All right. Well, we'll do it again, but much further in the future, I'm sure. But again,
we'll talk about working with
Patty and
Smith, Bob Dylan.
Oh, geez. God, I can't believe I missed Bob Dylan there. Okay.
Allen Ginsberg. Yeah. Here's a few more.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Another time.
Take care, Jack.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. All right, there we go, peoples. That wraps up our two-part conversation with music producer Jack Douglas. Aerosmith, Cheap Trick, John Lennon, Yoko Ono. Man, and that's we've only scratched the surface. We probably have heard 1% of 1% of the stories that guy has. So grateful he spent time with us here on the show. Again, I want to encourage you to check out the band Silver Planes. I've really enjoyed this album, Airbus. I've only got it on digital so far. I can't wait for the vinyl. But, man, what a cracker album. Makerecords.com. Just Google Silver Planes or search them up on your streaming services, and you'll get some new music that I think you'll enjoy there. Silver Planes is the band. Airbus is the album. Make Records is the record label. All right, that's going to wrap up today's episode. Appreciate everyone who shares and leaves us positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That is hugely helpful. Everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media, or putting them on communities, on Facebook or Reddit forums, that sort of thing. That's hugely helpful and appreciated. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.